The sun dipped low over the city, painting the skyline in hues of gold and crimson. Inside a high-end restaurant nestled in the heart of downtown, the ambience was all elegance, polished floors, sparkling chandeliers, and the faint hum of classical music drifting through the air. It was the kind of place where only the elite dined, where reservations were booked weeks in advance, and where appearances were everything. That evening, Amara, a young and ambitious waitress, moved briskly between tables. She prided herself on her efficiency and her ability to charm even the most demanding patrons. She had a sharp eye for detail and an even sharper sense of judgment, or so she thought. At 7 p.m., just as the dinner rush began, the front door swung open and a man stepped inside. He was dressed simply, a worn jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and he carried himself with an unassuming air. To Amara, he looked entirely out of place. "Excuse me," the man said, approaching the hostess stand where Amara stood. His voice was calm but carried a hint of authority. "I have a reservation for 7 under the name Mr. Brown." Amara arched a skeptical brow, her gaze sweeping over him dismissively. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked tonight," she said curtly. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the diners down the street." The man blinked, clearly taken aback. "I made this reservation a week ago. Could you check again, please?" Amara sighed, tapping at the computer with exaggerated impatience. She scrolled through the list of names and found it, Mr. Brown, table for 1, 7 p.m. But instead of acknowledging it, she pursed her lips and made a snap decision. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no record of your reservation," she lied. "As I said, we're completely booked." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded once, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Thank you for your time," he said, his tone polite but unreadable. Then he turned and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Amara shook her head, muttering under her breath. Some people just don't know their place. The evening continued without incident until about 20 minutes later when the restaurant manager, a tall and impeccably dressed man named Henry, emerged from the kitchen looking unusually flustered. He scanned the room, his eyes darting around as if searching for someone. "Amara," he called, beckoning her over. "Did a Mr. Brown arrive yet?" Amara's stomach tightened. No," she said hesitantly. "I don't think so." Henry frowned, clearly displeased. He called ahead to confirm his reservation. "He's the new owner of the restaurant, and he wanted to observe the staff and the service tonight." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. "The new owner?" she echoed weakly. Henry nodded, his expression stern. "Yes. And he's not someone we can afford to disappoint. If he's not here yet, find him. Now." Panic surged through Amara as she replayed the earlier interaction in her mind. The man she'd dismissed so rudely, the one she'd essentially thrown out, was the new owner? Her heart pounded as she rushed to the front door, scanning the street outside. There was no sign of him. Meanwhile, Mr. Brown had taken refuge at a modest cafe a few blocks away. He sat at a corner table, sipping a cup of black coffee, his expression calm but thoughtful. The encounter at the restaurant had been disappointing, but not entirely unexpected. He'd purchased the establishment with the intention of turning it into a more inclusive and welcoming space. Tonight had been meant as a test, and it seemed the staff had failed. Back at the restaurant, Amara's anxiety grew with each passing minute. She couldn't afford to lose this job, the tips alone covered her rent. Swallowing her pride, she decided to take action. Grabbing her coat, she stepped outside and began searching the nearby streets, asking passers-by if they'd seen a man matching Mr. Brown's description. Finally, she spotted him through the window of the cafe. Her stomach churned as she pushed open the door and approached his table. "Mr. Brown," she said hesitantly. He looked up, his expression neutral. "Yes?" I want to apologize, Amara stammered. There's been a misunderstanding. Your reservation is ready, and we'd be honored to have you dine with us. Mr. Brown studied her for a long moment before responding. A misunderstanding, you say? Amara nodded, her cheeks burning. Yes. I didn't realize who you were. His lips twitched in a faint smile. And if I weren't the owner? Would I still have a table? Amara opened her mouth to reply but found she couldn't. The weight of his question hung heavily in the air. Finally, she whispered, no. Probably not. Mr. Brown sighed, setting down his coffee. Thank you for your honesty. But I think I'll pass on dinner tonight. Please, Amara implored, desperation creeping into her voice. I'll make it right. Let me make it right. He regarded her thoughtfully for another moment before standing. Very well, he said. Lead the way. Back at the restaurant, Amara seated Mr. Brown at the best table in the house, ensuring he was treated like royalty. The staff, now aware of his identity, scrambled to provide flawless service. But as the evening progressed, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that the damage had already been done. When Mr. Brown finished his meal, he stood and addressed the room. Thank you for your hospitality, he said, his voice carrying an edge of finality. I'll be making some changes around here. Effective immediately. Amara's heart sank. She knew her actions had consequences, and now she would have to face them. But as Mr. Brown turned to leave, he paused beside her. You have potential, he said quietly. But potential means nothing without respect and humility. Remember that. And with that, he was gone, leaving Amara to grapple with the weight of his words, and the lesson they carried. The next morning, the staff assembled in the restaurant's dining room, summoned for an early meeting. Mr. Brown arrived promptly at 8 a.m., dressed in a sharp suit that exuded confidence. He greeted the staff with a calm demeanor but wasted no time getting to the point. Last night was an eye-opener, he began, his voice steady but firm. This restaurant is a reflection of its staff, and it's clear there are areas in need of improvement. Starting today, there will be changes. He glanced around the room, his gaze landing on Amara. She swallowed hard, her palms sweating. Amara, he said, while your handling of last night's situation was disappointing, I believe in second chances. You're being demoted to a junior server position. This will give you the opportunity to rebuild trust and prove your worth. Take this as a chance to learn and grow. Amara's face burned with a mix of embarrassment and relief. She had expected to be fired on the spot, but this demotion, though humiliating, was a lifeline. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Mr. Brown continued, addressing the rest of the team. As for the rest of you, I'll be implementing new training programs to ensure that every guest, no matter how they're dressed or who they are, is treated with respect and courtesy. This restaurant will become a place where everyone feels welcome. If anyone feels they cannot meet these standards, you are free to leave. The staff murmured among themselves, the gravity of his words sinking in. Mr. Brown's expression softened slightly. I'm not here to tear anyone down, he said. I want this restaurant to succeed, and that starts with all of you. Let's make this a place we can all be proud of. With that, he dismissed the meeting, leaving the staff to reflect on his words. As Amara returned to her duties that day, she resolved to take his advice to heart. She had been given a second chance, and she intended to make the most of it.